The council chamber was massive, stretching upward into darkness that even the glowing walls couldn't reach. Ji-won stood in the center of the circular platform, her hands bound behind her back with energy cuffs that hummed against her skin. Around her, dozens of alien species sat in their designated seats, watching her with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. She kept her face calm. That was important. Never let them see fear. The Arbiter, a creature named Thelvan, rose from his seat. He was tall, maybe 3 meters, made of something that looked like living crystal. Light moved through his body in patterns that Ji-won had learned meant he was pleased with himself. That wasn't a good sign. Ambassador Ji-won of Earth, Thelvan said, his voice echoing through translation devices embedded in the walls. You stand accused of aggressive diplomatic conduct, manipulation of trade agreements, and disrespect toward council authority. How do you plead? Ji-won wanted to laugh. Aggressive diplomatic conduct. That was their way of saying she'd been better at negotiations than they expected. The Velcrin Collective had tried to trap Earth into a terrible trade deal, one that would have given them control over human colony worlds. She'd seen through it and turned it around. Now they were angry. I followed all established protocols, she said clearly. Everything I did was legal under council law. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded. Others looked away. Everyone knew this was a show trial, but no one would speak against the Velcrin. They were too powerful, too connected. Thelvan's light pattern shifted to something sharper, anger maybe, or satisfaction. With crystalline species it was hard to tell. Legal perhaps, but wisdom and legality are not the same thing. You have embarrassed powerful members of this council. There must be consequences. Here it comes, Ji-won thought. She'd known this would happen the moment council security had arrested her 3 days ago. The only question was how bad it would be. The council sentences you to the trials of Dominion on Kragath 7. You will face our chosen champion for 30 planetary rotations. If you survive, you will be released with all charges dropped. The chamber exploded with noise. Even species that disliked humans seemed shocked. The trials of Dominion were reserved for war criminals, for monsters who destroyed entire worlds. No one survived them. That was the point. Ji-won felt her heart rate increase but forced her breathing to stay steady. 30 days. She could work with 30 days. Humans had survived worse. Her ancestors had survived ice ages with nothing but fire and stone tools. She had training, intelligence, and the one advantage no alien in this chamber truly understood. She was from Earth, a death world, and Deathworlders didn't give up. I accept the council's judgment, she said, her voice steady. Thelvan seemed surprised. He'd probably expected begging or protests. You will be transported immediately. May the void have mercy on your soul. They dragged her out of the chamber and onto a prison ship. The journey to Kragath 7 took 2 days. The guards were a species called the Hentok, tall and thin with too many joints in their limbs. They didn't speak to her, but she caught them staring when they thought she wasn't looking. On the second day, one of them finally spoke. Why aren't you afraid? He asked, his translator making his voice sound hollow. Ji-won looked up from the corner where she sat. Would being afraid help me survive? The guard tilted his head in a gesture she'd learned meant confusion. No, but all the others were afraid. They screamed and cried. You just sit there. The others weren't human. The guard made a sound that might have been a laugh. One human won't make a difference. The Vorathul has never been defeated. It will tear you apart. Maybe, Ji-won said. Or maybe it's never faced a human before. The guard walked away, but she saw him glance back twice. Kragath 7 was a small moon orbiting a gas giant. The prison was built into the moon's surface, and the arena was a massive dome open to the black sky above. When they brought her down in chains, she could see stars through the transparent ceiling. Hundreds of aliens filled the viewing platforms, here to watch her die. They removed her chains and pushed her through an energy barrier that sealed behind her with a crackling sound. The arena floor was rough stone, scattered with rocks, and a few twisted metal structures that might have been cover. It was roughly circular, maybe 200 meters across. On the far side, a massive door was opening. Ji-won moved to the center of the arena and waited. The thing that emerged made several aliens in the crowd gasp. It was huge, easily 4 meters tall, walking on 6 limbs that ended in claws like curved blades. Its body was covered in black armor that looked organic, and when it moved, the armor plates shifted and clicked together. But what caught Ji-won's attention were the eyes. It had dozens of them, clustered on what might have been a head, and they were all focused on her with an intelligence that made her skin prickle. This wasn't a mindless beast. This was a predator, and a smart one. The crowd was cheering now, excited for the violence to start. Announcement systems she couldn't see blared information about the Vorathul, listing its kills, describing its perfect record. 17 champions had faced it. None had survived more than 3 days. The creature started walking toward her, slow and deliberate, testing her, watching her. Ji-won didn't run. That would trigger its chase instinct. Instead, she moved sideways, keeping her eyes on it, making herself look bigger by spreading her arms slightly. On Earth, this worked with bears sometimes. Maybe it would work here. The Vorathul stopped. Its head tilted, eyes focusing and refocusing. It made a sound like rocks grinding together. Then it charged. Ji-won threw herself sideways, rolling behind one of the metal structures. The creature's claws hit where she'd been standing, gouging deep marks in the stone. It was fast. Much faster than something that size should be. She scrambled to her feet and ran, not in a straight line but in a pattern, making herself hard to predict. The Vorathul followed but didn't seem to be trying its hardest. It was still testing her, learning how she moved. Good. That meant it was smart enough to be cautious. And if it was cautious, it could learn. If it could learn, maybe it could understand. Ji-won found a gap between 2 rocks and wedged herself in, catching her breath. The Vorathul circled the position but didn't attack. It was watching again. She stared back at it, her mind racing. 30 days. She had to survive 30 days with this thing. But survival meant different things to different species. For humans, survival often meant making friends with things that wanted to kill you. Her ancestors had done it with wolves. They'd turned apex predators into companions who slept by their fires and helped them hunt. Ji-won looked at the Vorathul and wondered if it was possible. The creature tilted its head again, and she could swear it looked curious. Day 1, she thought, 29 to go. Day 30 arrived with artificial sunrise, lights slowly brightening across the arena. Ji-won had barely slept, too focused on what was coming. Kyung-ho had stayed nearby all night, its presence oddly comforting despite everything it looked like. The viewing platforms were packed. Word had spread that this was the final day, that the human would either die or be released. Either way, it would be a show. Arbiter Thelvan was there personally, his crystalline form gleaming in the front row. At exactly midday, the barriers would drop. That was how it always worked. The survivor would be escorted out, and the Vorathul would be secured and returned to its holding cell. Except today wouldn't go like that. Ji-won stood in the center of the arena, waiting. She'd used the last piece of cable from the broken technology to make something that looked like a leash. It was useless as an actual restraint, but it would send the right message. Kyung-ho stood beside her, plates shifting through colors that only she understood. Ready, those colors said. Trusting. The countdown began, displayed on screens around the arena. The crowd grew louder, excited. Some were placing last-minute bets on whether she'd survived. Most bet she'd be dead or dying. 3 minutes. 2 minutes. 1. The barriers flickered and dropped with a sound like thunder. Immediately, klaxons began blaring. Security systems went haywire, detecting that the Vorathul was still active, still in the arena with the human. Guards rushed toward the arena entrance, weapons raised. Then they stopped, staring. Ji-won walked forward, calm and steady. Behind her, connected by the makeshift cable leash, walked Kyung-ho. The massive creature moved with perfect precision, matching her pace, clearly under control. The crowd went silent. This was impossible. The Vorthul was uncontrollable, everyone knew that. It was a killing machine, bred for violence and nothing else. But there it was, following a human girl like a trained pet. Jiwan walked through the arena entrance and into the corridor beyond. Guards backed away, unsure what to do. Their training hadn't covered this situation. She continued walking, heading toward the main council viewing chamber. Arbiter Thelvan rushed to meet her, other council members trailing behind. His light patterns showed confusion and anger. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "The Vorthul must be contained immediately." Jiwan stopped walking. Kyungho stopped beside her, lowering its body slightly. To the aliens, it might have looked like an aggressive posture. But Jiwan knew better. It was showing deference to her, proving who was in charge. "I completed your trial," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I survived 30 days. According to your own laws, I'm free to go. And according to ancient trial by combat, laws that this council established 1,000 years ago, the victor claims the spoils of battle." She held up the leash. "Kyungho is my spoils." The chamber erupted in chaos. Council members shouted at each other in dozens of languages. Security forces raised weapons but didn't fire, too afraid of hitting council members in the crossfire. Thelvan's patterns turned sharp and angry. "Impossible. The Vorthul cannot be controlled. It must be contained." "Then try to contain it," Jiwan said simply. Thelvan made a gesture. Security forces activated override codes, biological imperatives, that should have forced the Vorthul into shutdown mode. They'd bred those commands into its DNA, ensuring complete control. Nothing happened. Kyungho just stood there, armor plates showing that blue color of calm trust. Panic spread through the council. If the override codes didn't work, they had no way to control the creature. Some members started backing toward exits. "How?" Thelvan whispered, his light patterns showing fear for the first time. Jiwan smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "You made a mistake. You assumed the Vorthul was just an animal, something you could train and control. But Kyungho isn't an animal. Its species had civilization when your ancestors were still learning to use tools." She gestured to Kyungho, and the creature moved forward slightly. Every weapon in the room tracked its movement, but no one dared fire. "The Vorthul come from the deep void, from the darkness between galaxies. They're ancient, intelligent, and powerful. You found their technology and perverted it. You captured their young and tortured them into becoming weapons. You thought you were so clever." Jiwan's voice hardened. "But you forgot something. Humans come from a death world. We specialize in making friends with predators. We turned wolves into dogs. We made allies of creatures that should have eaten us. And we're very, very good at recognizing when someone is being abused." She held up her crude electrical interface device. "Kyungho told me everything. Where its people are, what you did to them. And most importantly, it told me that there are 7 others like it, trapped in facilities across the galaxy, being used as weapons just like it was." The council chamber was dead silent now. Even the security forces had lowered their weapons slightly, listening. "So here's what's going to happen," Jiwan continued. "First, you're going to restore my ambassadorial status and issue a formal apology. Second, you're going to release every Vorthul in captivity and provide them safe passage to wherever they want to go. Third, you're going to give me full access to your xenobiological research databases." "And if we refuse?" Thelvan asked, trying to sound authoritative but failing. Jiwan looked at Kyungho. The creature understood without words. There was a pulse, like a wave of pressure through the air. Every piece of technology in the chamber flickered. Lights dimmed, screens went dark. Life support systems made alarming sounds before backup generators kicked in. Then everything came back online, but the message was clear. "That was just a small demonstration," Jiwan said quietly. "Kyungho can generate electromagnetic pulses strong enough to shut down every system in this facility. Life support, gravity, hull integrity, everything. And that's just one Vorthul. Imagine what 8 could do working together." She let that sink in for a moment. "But we don't want to do that." Kyung-ho doesn't want revenge. It wants freedom. Its people want to be left alone, and I want to make sure no one else gets abused the way it was. So we can do this the easy way or we can do it the hard way. Your choice. Thelvan looked around at his fellow council members. She could see the calculation in their body language. They were trying to figure out if she was bluffing, if they could somehow regain control. Then one of the council members, a floating being made of energy fields, spoke up. She speaks truth. I accessed the old records. The Vorathul species was classified as extremely dangerous precisely because of their technological capabilities. We should have never tried to weaponize them, another member agreed. If their main population learns what we've done, it could mean war. We might not survive that. More voices joined in, supporting the energy being's assessment. Thelvan's light patterns shifted, showing resignation. Very well, he said finally. The council accepts your terms. You will have your status restored, the Vorathul will be released, and you'll have access to the databases. But understand this, human. You've made powerful enemies today. Jiwon met his gaze steadily. I already had powerful enemies. That's why I was here in the first place. The difference is now I have powerful friends too. She placed a hand on Kyung-ho's armored side. The creature's plates shifted to that warm blue color, and she felt a pulse of electrical communication through her palm. Gratitude, friendship, trust. One more thing, Jiwon added. You're going to announce this publicly. Every species in the galaxy needs to know what happened here. They need to know that the council isn't above justice, that even the most powerful can be held accountable. Thelvan looked like he wanted to argue, but several other council members were nodding. They understood the political reality. If this story got out through unofficial channels, it would be worse. Better to control the narrative. It will be done, he said. 3 hours later, Jiwon stood on the bridge of a council transport ship, heading toward the first facility where another Vorathul was held. Kyung-ho was with her, studying the star maps with intense focus. They had 6 more to rescue. Then, they would head to the void, to the space between galaxies where Kyung-ho's people waited. Jiwon watched the stars blur past and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. She'd gone into that arena expecting to die. Instead, she'd found a friend, exposed a conspiracy, and started a chain of events that would change the galaxy. Not bad for 30 days of work. The first 5 days were about staying alive. Jiwon learned the arena like it was a second home, memorizing every rock, every shadow, every place where she could hide or defend herself. The Vorathul hunted her, but not with the mindless aggression she'd expected. It was patient, methodical, like a cat playing with prey it knew couldn't escape. But Jiwon wasn't prey. She was a predator too, just a different kind. On the second day, the arena systems dropped food for her. A small package appeared through a slot in the wall, containing compressed nutrient bars that tasted like cardboard but would keep her alive. She ate half and saved the rest. Waste was the enemy of survival. The Vorathul watched from across the arena. It didn't need the food they dropped for her. She'd figured out it was fed somewhere else, probably before being released into the arena each day, but it was curious about what she was doing. On the third day, Jiwon did something that made the crowd go silent. She took a piece of her nutrient bar and threw it toward the Vorathul. Not at it, just near it. An offering. The creature stared at the food for a long moment, then at her. Its many eyes focused and refocused, trying to understand. Nothing had ever offered it food before. Everything that entered the arena either fought or ran. The Vorathul didn't eat the offering. But it didn't attack her for the rest of that day either. By the 5th day, Jiwon had a theory. The Vorathul wasn't just intelligent. It was observing her the same way she was observing it. They were both trying to understand each other. The aliens in the crowd were getting restless. They wanted blood, not this strange dance between human and monster. She decided to test something. When the Vorathul appeared that morning, Jiwon didn't hide. She sat in the open, cross-legged on the ground, and watched it approach. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her body relaxed. On Earth, wolves understood body language. Tension meant threat. Relaxation meant peace. The Vorathul stopped 3 meters away. It lowered its body slightly, claws scraping against stone. Was that aggression? Or was it matching her posture? She couldn't tell yet. Jiwan slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of nutrient bar. She placed it on the ground between them, then moved back. The creature watched every movement with those unsettling eyes. For a long minute, nothing happened. The crowd was completely silent, confused by what they were seeing. Then the Vorthal moved forward, quick but not attacking. It picked up the food with one claw, examined it, and then did something that made Jiwan's breath catch. It ate the offering. Day 6 began differently. When the Vorthal entered the arena, it didn't immediately hunt her. It stood at the entrance and waited. Jiwan approached slowly, stopping at what felt like a safe distance. She had another piece of food ready. This time, when she placed it down, the Vorthal came forward immediately and ate. Then it made a sound, that grinding rock noise but softer. Was it trying to communicate? Jiwan had studied xenobiology as part of her diplomatic training. She knew that many species communicated in ways humans couldn't naturally perceive. Sound, yes, but also light. Chemical signals, electromagnetic fields. The Vorthal's armor plates seemed to shift colors slightly in certain light. Maybe that was part of it. She started paying attention to those shifts. By day 8, she'd noticed patterns. When the creature was aggressive, the plates were darker. When it seemed curious, they had a faint blue tint. When it was calm, they were almost gray. Communication. It was trying to communicate. On day 9, G1 found a piece of broken technology in the corner of the arena. It looked like part of an old viewing screen, cracked and mostly dead. But when she touched it, she felt a tiny pulse of electricity. An idea formed in her mind. She'd read reports about bioelectric species, creatures that used electrical fields to sense and communicate. What if the Vorthal was one of them? What if all this time it had been trying to talk to her and she just couldn't hear it? She spent day 10 working on the broken screen, using rocks to carefully break away the casing and expose the internal components. The crowd seemed baffled by her behavior. The Vorthal watched with what she was starting to recognize as intense interest. By day 12, she had something that might work, a crude interface that could detect and display electrical signals. She'd powered it using the energy cuffs they'd never removed from her wrists, slowly draining them over 2 days until she had enough charge. When the Vorthal approached that day, G1 held up the device and turned it on. The screen flickered, then erupted with patterns, waves and pulses of light that corresponded with the creature's movements. It was speaking. It had always been speaking. The Vorthal went completely still. Then its armor plates shifted rapidly through colors and the device in G1's hands went crazy with patterns. If she'd had to guess, she'd say the creature was shocked, excited, maybe even happy. She held up one hand in greeting, the universal gesture of peace. The Vorthal raised one of its claws and mimicked the gesture. The crowd erupted in confused noise. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Vorthal was a killing machine, bred and trained for violence. It wasn't supposed to make friends. But G1 was human, and humans specialized in making friends with things that shouldn't be friendly. Over the next 8 days, they learned to communicate. It was slow and frustrating. The device could only give her rough translations, impressions rather than clear words. But it was enough. She learned that the Vorthal had a name or something close to it. A pattern of electrical pulses that felt like Kyungho when she tried to translate it into Korean sounds. It seemed to like that she gave it a name. Everything else just called it the Vorthal or the monster. Kyungho learned that she was G1, that she came from a world far away, that she was trapped here just like it was. On day 15, Kyungho told her something that made her blood run cold. It showed her images through the electrical interface, memories of being captured as something small, barely hatched. It had been taken from somewhere dark and cold, somewhere between the stars. It had been hurt, starved, trained to kill through pain and fear. The council hadn't just found a monster. They'd made one. Jiwan felt rage building in her chest. She knew what it was like to be used, to be treated as a tool instead of a person. The council had done this to Kyungho, and they'd done it to countless others. The 17 champions it had killed hadn't been victories. They'd been tragedies. She asked Kyungho if it wanted to escape. The creature's response was immediate and clear. Yes, but it was impossible. The arena was designed to be escape-proof. The barriers were too strong, the systems too complex. G1 smiled. and it must have been a fierce smile because Kyung-ho pulled back slightly. "Humans are good at impossible things," she said, even though she knew it couldn't fully understand her words. But it could read her emotions through the electrical field, and right now she was feeling determined, angry, ready to fight. Kyung-ho's armor plates shifted to that blue color again. Trust, she'd learned. It meant trust. On day 20, they started planning. Kyung-ho knew things about the arena that the council didn't think it understood. It could sense the electrical systems, the power flows, the weak points. Its species, it showed her, had been masters of technology long before the council existed. The knowledge was in its genetic memory, waiting to be unlocked. Together, they mapped the arena's systems. Ji-won used her diplomatic training to think strategically, to plan 3 steps ahead. Kyung-ho used its electrical senses to find the vulnerabilities. By day 25, they had a plan. It was risky and required perfect timing, but it might work. The crowd had gotten bored. The human wasn't dying and the monster wasn't killing. Some aliens had stopped coming to watch. The council was frustrated but had to maintain their sentence. 30 days was 30 days. Ji-won and Kyung-ho spent the last 5 days preparing. She taught it about trust, about partnership. It taught her to move like something from the void, to think like a predator that had no natural predators. On day 29, Ji-won looked up at the stars through the arena's ceiling and wondered if she'd see tomorrow. Kyung-ho stood beside her, its armor plates showing that gray color of calm. Tomorrow, the barriers would drop. Tomorrow, the council expected to release either a corpse or a broken survivor. Tomorrow, they were going to learn what happened when you tried to break a human and her friend. The first facility was on a moon called Drex 9, hidden inside what looked like a mining operation. The council had given Ji-won the coordinates reluctantly, along with access codes that would let her inside. Kyung-ho stood beside her as the transport ship descended through the thin atmosphere. "Can you sense it?" she asked. "Your friend?" Kyung-ho's electrical pulse came through the device she now wore on her wrist, upgraded with better technology. The translation was clearer now. Yes, scared, angry, alone. The facility guards met them at the entrance, looking nervous. They'd received orders from the council, but clearly didn't like them. One of them, a species with too many arms and a crystalline face, stepped forward. "The containment area is in Section 7, it said. But I warn you, this one is violent. It killed 3 handlers last month." "Because you were hurting it," Ji-won said flatly. "Take us there now." They walked through corridors that felt more like a prison than a research facility. Everything was gray metal and harsh lights. She could see cells holding other creatures, all looking miserable and afraid. This place was a nightmare. Section 7 was at the facility's heart behind multiple security doors. When they finally entered, Ji-won saw a chamber similar to her arena but smaller. In the center, chained with energy restraints, was another Vorathul. This one was smaller than Kyung-ho, its armor plates showing dark, angry colors. It lunged at them the moment the inner door opened, but the chains held it back. The guards raised weapons. "Don't," Ji-won said sharply. She looked at Kyung-ho. "Can you talk to it?" Kyung-ho moved forward slowly, plates shifting through complex color patterns. Then it released an electrical pulse, gentle and controlled. The chained Vorathul went still, its many eyes focusing on Kyung-ho. Another pulse. Then another. It was like watching a conversation in a language Ji-won couldn't fully understand. The chained Vorathul made a sound, that grinding rock noise, but higher pitched, distressed. Kyung-ho responded with more pulses, and gradually, the angry colors faded from the other creature's armor. "It's scared," Ji-won told the guards. "Release the restraints." "That's against protocol," the guard protested. Ji-won turned to face it directly. "The council gave me authority here. Release it or I'll have Kyung-ho shut down every system in this facility." The guard hesitated, then entered commands on a control panel. The energy restraints flickered and died. The freed Vorathul could have attacked. Instead, it moved close to Kyung-ho, touching its armor plates to Kyung-ho's in what was clearly a greeting. "Or maybe a reunion. What's its name?" Ji-won asked through her device. Kyung-ho's response came as a pattern she translated to Korean sounds. Minho. The younger one's name was Minho. They left Drex 9 with Minho, who stayed close to Kyung-ho like a younger sibling seeking protection. The second facility was easier. The third one was on a military station, and the commander there tried to resist until Minho and Kyung-ho both released electromagnetic pulses, that made every weapon on the station go dead. By the time they reached the 7th facility, Ji-won's ship carried 6 freed Vorathal. She'd named them using Korean names that felt right, translating their electrical patterns into sounds. Miho, Suji, Daehyun, Jisoo, Taewon, and Yuna. Each had their own personality, their own pain, their own story of capture and abuse. The 7th Vorathal, who she named Sora, was the hardest rescue. It had been used in actual combat, forced to fight in military operations. It didn't trust anyone, not even other Vorathal at first, but slowly, over days of patient communication, Sora began to understand that it was free. With all 8 Vorathal together, Ji-won's ship felt crowded but alive. They communicated constantly with each other, sharing memories, rebuilding connections that had been torn apart by their captivity. She watched them with something like joy. Ready to go home? She asked Kyung-ho one night as they traveled through hyperspace. Its response was immediate, yes, but worried. Don't know if they'll accept us. We've been gone so long. They'll accept you, Ji-won said with confidence she didn't quite feel. You're their children. They'll want you back. Following the genetic memories shared by all 8 Vorathal, they set course for the void, the empty space between galaxies, where most species never traveled because there was nothing there. No stars, no planets, just darkness and the thin whisper of dark matter. But the Vorathal saw something different. They sensed structures in the dark matter, patterns that normal sensors couldn't detect. As they traveled deeper into the void, those patterns became clearer. After 2 weeks of travel, the sensors detected something impossible. A massive structure, larger than a planet hanging in the darkness. It was made of materials that shouldn't exist, held together by forces that physics said were impossible. The Vorathal homeworld, or what passed for one. Ji-won brought the ship close and immediately her communication systems erupted with signals. Complex patterns of electromagnetic pulses, too sophisticated for her device to fully translate. The Vorathal on her ship all responded at once, their combined pulses making the ship's systems flicker. What are they saying? She asked Kyung-ho. Welcome home. And who is the small one who brings our children back? That was her, apparently. The small one. Compared to what she was seeing on the sensors, she couldn't argue with that description. A section of the massive structure opened, and guidance signals directed her ship inside. She followed, trusting Kyung-ho and the others. The interior was vast, filled with technology that made Earth's most advanced systems look like stone tools. They landed in a chamber that adjusted its size to fit her ship. And when Ji-won opened the airlock, she was met by 3 adult Vorathal. They were massive, easily twice the size of Kyung-ho, their armor plates showing colors she'd never seen before. The 8 young ones rushed out, electromagnetic pulses flying in every direction. It was clearly a reunion, joy and relief mixing together. Ji-won stood to the side, not wanting to interrupt. Then one of the adult Vorathal approached her. It lowered its body, bringing its head down to her level, and she could see intelligence in those multifaceted eyes that made her feel very small. A pulse came through her device. Thank you for bringing them home. How did a small one accomplish this? Humans are good at making friends, Ji-won said, hoping her device could translate properly. And I recognized that they were being hurt. I couldn't let that continue. The adult Vorathal studied her for a long moment. We watched your world once, long ago. We saw your species climb down from trees and struggle to survive. We wondered if you would make it. We're stubborn, Ji-won said with a small smile. Yes, like us. The adult's armor plates shifted to warm colors. We live in the void because we choose to. The galaxy is too loud, too crowded. But we remember the younger species we watch sometimes. We saw what the council did to our children. We were preparing to respond. The adult's colors darkened. Not kindly. They've agreed to release all Vorathal, Ji-won said quickly, and I've exposed what they did. The whole galaxy knows now. Good. The adult's colors lightened again. You prevented a war, small one. If we had come in anger, many would have died. Both theirs and ours. Another adult Vorathal approached, this one's patterns even more complex. It communicated directly with Kyung-ho for several minutes, then turned to Ji-won. Our child speaks highly of you. It says you understood when no one else did. That you offered friendship when others offered only pain. This is a rare gift. Kyung-ho taught me too, Ji-won said. About patience. About seeing beyond appearances. The 2 adults communicated with each other, patterns flickering too fast for her to follow. Then they both turned to her. "We have a proposition. Your species is young but shows promise. You understand cooperation, you adapt, you refuse to be prey. These are Voidwalker traits." The first adult continued. "We will open diplomatic relations with Earth. Share some technology, some knowledge, but not with the Council. They have proven themselves unworthy." "An alliance?" Jiwon asked, her heart racing. "More than that. A recognition. You and we are kindred, born in hard places, shaped by darkness, refusing to give up. The galaxy thinks the void is empty. Let them think that. But we will remember that humans brought our children home." Jiwon felt tears building in her eyes. This was more than she'd hoped for, more than she'd dreamed possible. "Earth will be honored," she said. The meeting lasted for 3 more days. Jiwon learned about Vorathul history, their technology, their philosophy. They'd chosen isolation not from fear but from wisdom, preferring peace in the darkness to war in the light. But they would make an exception for humans, who'd proven themselves worthy of trust. When it was time to leave, all 8 of the young Vorathul came to see her off. Kyung-ho stood closest, plates showing colors that needed no translation. "Will I see you again?" Jiwon asked. "Always." Kyung-ho's pulse was warm and certain. "We are friends. That doesn't end just because we're far apart." As her ship pulled away from the massive structure, Jiwon watched it disappear into the darkness of the void. Invisible to normal sensors once more, she'd gone looking for justice and found something better. A friend, an alliance, and proof that the galaxy could be better than it was. 3 months after leaving the void, Ji-won returned to the Galactic Council chambers. The room looked the same as it had during her trial, but everything felt different now. She wasn't in chains this time. She walked in freely, and she didn't walk alone. Kyung-ho moved beside her, armor plates showing calm colors. Behind them came 7 more Vorathul, each freed from their captivity. And behind them walked 36 human Marines who'd volunteered for what the media was calling the Void Alliance. They wore black armor with the symbol of Earth, and a Vorathul design worked together. The chamber went silent as they entered. Every species present watched with expressions ranging from fear to curiosity to respect. This wasn't the same human who'd been sentenced to death. This was Ambassador Ji-won, representative of the Void Alliance, and she had backing that made even the most powerful council members nervous. Arbiter Thelvan stood from his seat. His crystalline body showed patterns of forced diplomacy. He'd been forced to make a public announcement about what happened, about the abuse of the Vorathul, about Ji-won's victory. It had cost him political power. Several members of his species had called for his removal. Ambassador Ji-won, he said carefully, the Council recognizes your authority as representative of the Void Alliance. Please state your purpose. I'm here to make sure you keep your promises, Ji-won said, her voice carrying clearly. The Vorathul have been freed, but the systems that allowed their abuse are still in place. We need to fix that, murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others looked away. What exactly are you proposing? Asked a council member from a species called the Nethrim, floating beings of energy who'd always seemed more reasonable than most. Ji-won had prepared for this. She'd spent the last 3 months working with human diplomats and Vorathul advisors to create a comprehensive plan. First, inspection protocols. Any facility that holds sentient beings needs to be open to surprise inspections by neutral parties. No more secret prisons. No more hidden research stations where you torture people and call it science. Several council members tried to protest, but the Nethrim raised a tendril of energy, calling for silence. Continue, it said. Second, rights for all sentient species. It doesn't matter if they're not part of the Council. It doesn't matter if they're young or small or technologically primitive. If they're sentient, they have rights. That includes the right not to be enslaved, weaponized, or experimented on. More protests, louder this time. Ji-won waited them out. Third, enforcement. The Void Alliance is offering to provide ships and personnel to help enforce these new rules. We're not trying to take over. We're offering to help build something better. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species were in favor, seeing this as a way to improve the Council's reputation. Others were against it, viewing it as an attempt by humans and Vorathul to seize power. Thelvan called for order, but it took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down. These are significant changes you're proposing, he said carefully. The Council will need time to deliberate. You have 1 week, Ji-won said firmly. After that, the Void Alliance will start operating independently. We'll patrol former council territory. We'll free anyone being held unjustly and we'll make very public what we find. It would be better for everyone if we worked together. It was a diplomatic way of saying they'd expose every dirty secret the council had if they didn't cooperate. Everyone in the chamber understood that. Over the next week, Jiwon met with individual council members, building support. The Nethrim were her strongest allies, joined by several other species who'd been quietly opposing the council's worst practices for years. Against her were the old powers, species like the Velkrin who'd built their wealth and influence on exploitation. But public opinion was shifting. The story of the human who'd befriended the unbeatable monster had spread across the galaxy. Young people from dozens of species were calling for reform, for justice, for a better council. The old powers were losing their grip. On the 7th day, the council voted. It was close, but the reforms passed. Inspection protocols, rights for all sentient beings, and cooperation with the Void Alliance. It wasn't everything Jiwon wanted, but it was a start. After the vote, she met with the Velkrin leadership privately. They sat in a small conference room, just her, Kyung-ho, and 3 Velkrin officials who'd orchestrated her trial. "You've won," one of them said bitterly. "Is this where you take revenge?" Jiwon looked at them for a long moment. Part of her wanted revenge. They'd tried to kill her, had sentenced her to death for doing her job well. But revenge wouldn't fix anything. "No," she said finally, "but you need to understand something. The galaxy is changing. The old way of doing things where the strong exploit the weak, that's ending. You can adapt or you can become irrelevant. Your choice." She stood to leave, then paused. "And one more thing. If you ever try something like this again, with me or anyone else, you won't be dealing with council justice. You'll be dealing with the Void Alliance, and we're much less forgiving." The Velkrin said nothing, but their body language showed they'd received the message. That night, Jiwon stood on the observation deck of humanity's first Void-capable dreadnought, the ship that would serve as the Void Alliance's flagship. It was a joint construction, human engineering combined with Vorathol technology, sleek and powerful, capable of traveling deeper into space than any council ship. Kyung-ho joined her at the window looking out at the stars. "Do you think this will work?" she asked. "Can we really change the galaxy?" Kyung-ho's response came through her wrist device, now a permanent fixture. "Change is slow, but necessary. We helped start it. Others will continue it. Do you regret anything? Leaving the Void, getting involved in all this?" Now Kyung-ho's colors shifted to warm blue. "Was prisoner, was weapon. Now I'm friend. Now I'm free. Because of you. Because of us," Jiwon corrected. "We did this together." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching stars blur past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. "What will you do now?" she asked. "You could go back to the Void. Be with your people. We'll visit, but also we'll stay with you. With Alliance. There is work to do. Others to help." Kyung-ho paused, then added, "And you are Pack now." "Pack stays together." Jiwon smiled, feeling tears building again. "Yeah, we're Pack." 5 years later, Ambassador Jiwon attended a council session to present the Void Alliance's annual report. The chamber had changed significantly. More species had joined the council, including several that had previously been exploited. The old guard was still there, but their power had diminished. The Void Alliance now included 47 species. Not the most powerful or advanced, but those who'd been overlooked, exploited, or dismissed by the traditional powers. Together, they'd freed thousands of enslaved beings, shut down dozens of illegal operations, and proven that a different way was possible. Jiwon no longer served as active ambassador. That role had passed to younger diplomats, humans, and other species working together. She'd moved into an advisory position, teaching the next generation how to navigate galactic politics. But she still traveled with Kyung-ho, who'd become a leader among the Vorathul, who chose to remain active in the galaxy. Most had returned to the Void, but a few dozen stayed to help, teaching other species their technology and philosophy. After the council session, Jiwon prepared to return to Earth. She'd bought a small house in the mountains of Korea near where her grandparents had lived. It was quiet there, peaceful. A good place to rest between missions. Kyung-ho would come with her. It always did once per year, spending a month in the mountains before returning to work. The locals had gotten used to seeing the massive creature. though tourists still sometimes got startled. As their shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, Kyung-ho sent her a pulse. Grateful. For everything. I should be thanking you, Ji-won said. You changed my life, changed each other. That is what friends do. They landed near her house, and Ji-won led Kyung-ho up the mountain path. The view was beautiful, overlooking valleys and forests, so different from the arena where they'd met, from the void where Kyung-ho's people lived, from the council chambers where they'd fought for change. That night, they sat together under the stars. Kyung-ho pointed out constellations in the direction of the void, teaching her the Vorathul names for different regions of space. She taught it Korean folk songs, singing quietly in the mountain air. Throughout the galaxy, the story of the Deathworlder girl and the monster had become legend. They told it to children as a bedtime story, to students as a history lesson, to soldiers as inspiration. The girl who faced death and came back with a friend. The monster who learned it could be more than a weapon. But sitting there on the mountain, none of that mattered. They weren't legends or symbols. They were just friends, sharing a quiet moment under alien stars. You know what the best part is? Ji-won said suddenly. What? When we met, you were the scariest thing I'd ever seen. Now you're the safest thing in my life. Isn't that strange? Not strange. That is friendship. Fear becomes trust. Danger becomes safety. Alone becomes together. Ji-won leaned against Kyung-ho's armored side, feeling the warm pulse of its bioelectricity. Yeah, she said softly. That's friendship. In the void between galaxies, the Vorathul elders watched the stars and,